Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the Gone But Not Forgotten event, in which the zombie goat is added to the game. So this week, of course, we have the Valentine's Day pet coming in on this Wednesday, which is the actual holiday on this Friday, with the free reward from the calendar on that exact day of Valentine's Day. So definitely make sure to go and pick up both of those when that rolls around. Also be handing out one of the old Valentine's Day pets on this channel on stream at about 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we go do the stream as we do every Monday night. One other thing to mention that I didn't mention last week, two things. The first is we actually got a Guild Wars sneak peek. I'm not going to go over this too much right now because there's not like too much extra information. It's a little bit of screenshots and stuff like that, but we will go over a little bit more in depth on stream later tonight. But if you do want to go check it out now, I will be posting a link in the description. It's been out since January 31st. I believe they're currently running a beta for it too, so in the next few weeks we'll probably be getting the Guild War patch. And of course they also had the previous preview as well as far as that information, so I will be posting both those in the description below if you do want to go and peek at them if you haven't already ended up seeing them. The other thing that I want to go and mention is next week some hurricane damage to the floor is being fixed for the house, so I will not be around on Monday for the stream and potentially not for the video. It depends how early I can get it out. Like if I try doing it at this time, I won't be able to get it out, but you know, if I can get it out at like 2, 3, 4 a.m. if I'm up at that time, I should hopefully be able to next week. But I'm going to be gone for like a few days while they go do a bunch of work on the floor, hopefully get all that fixed up from all the decay and everything from multiple hurricanes that hits from several years ago. We got most of the things repaired. That's like one of the last things that still need to be, so we're getting that done finally and just getting all the floors pretty much completely replaced in the whole house. Obviously that will take a little bit of time and is coinciding with the next Monday, so if there's not a Monday event video next week, there's definitely no stream, but if there's not a Monday event video next week, yeah, that's why. Because the earliest I can get it out, if I don't get it out at like 3 a.m. on that morning, would probably be like Wednesday or Thursday. So do be wary of that if the video is absurdly late or not around, is that is probably what ended up happening. But anyways, we are here now, so let's go over absolutely everything. Let's start with the teams. We got 11 teams to go show. We'll go there and then start making our rounds around to everything else. So as far as the world event is concerned, it is a beast restriction that we are allowed to use anything. I was mentioning a little while back when She ended up coming in through the Lunar New Year event for the Year of the Snake, that this would be pretty decent in beast restriction, so what a better time to bring it out than during beast restriction with She plus Forest Guardian. Forest Guardian give all beasts 50% mana start, and She, of course, just a really good synergy for various skull-related beast teams, or really any skull-related team that's a little bit more purple heavy. The only big issue with this, of course, is Forest Guardian itself is not purple, which is not ideal, but you know, it still ends up giving you your 50% mana start across your entire team. We're just using a wand in order to go get some mana accumulation, though you could use anything there, even offsetting it with even more skull spam or more mana accumulation. And we're using Queen Aurora for that mana accumulation aspect as well, not only being a beast, but also giving us all that extra mana while also having mana off of its ability. But we're mostly just spamming She and Forest Guardian until we end up winning it out. As far as the lower rarity team for beast, I'm going to end up going with a Bork mech and basically just put whatever your best 2 damage sources are. Bork is a epic that does a mash destroy, and we're going to be 50% mana starting it with that of the Mechanist Hero class, which also gives us access to Dispel. You then go put your 2 biggest damage sources that you have available. If we go over to the restriction of something like Beast and go to base rarity right here, we could end up seeing that some of these options, if you end up having it, would be good for Torius, as he's a pretty nice AoE. Pan has quite a bit of damage, anything like that, any kind of AoE, anything that can kill everything else simultaneously. In this case, keep in mind that you do have access to both skull damage and spell damage, so you can go down a cast route, but can also still go down a skull route. The main reason I have this shown for the cheaper team, even though it is a legend from a faction. You just throw some shards at Weirwoods, and you would end up getting him. However, this team can be replaced out for absolutely any damage sources at all that you have. I just happen to have the double of him, but the core of the team is just Bork into Wand or any mana accumulation weapon into whatever your 2 biggest damage sources are, using these 2 to mana accumulate for whatever your 2 bigger damage sources are. But this just goes down the skull route. He can also transform into other things, which normally could be a bad thing, but can sometimes end up helping as well. But it's mostly just a skull spam team with a slightly lower rarity rather than using legends. It is a easy to obtain faction legend, which is substantially easier to get than a standard off-week legend. As far as the factions are concerned, we got 2 events this week, one on Tuesday, one on Friday, Saturday, Sunday for the weekend one. The one for Friday, Saturday, Sunday for the weekend is the Dark Court with a yellow-purple. However, this one right here is for Pan's Veil's The Warrens, which is a green yellow. So with that being said, and of course you're allowed to use any hero weapon. So for this we have a pretty standard Rowan team for the first one, just without the 50% mana start since it does not fit the color restriction. And then we just have a mass mana accumulation team into High King Iron God's Catherics for the higher level range. As far as the Purifaction is concerned, you're basically just spamming Luna. We're using one bunny core with a +1 into it. The main reason for this is just to try to get a little bit more yellows onto the board, which then feed into all your Luna, which then go and spam out the enemy until you win. It's one of those pretty standard faction events where you just AoE down the enemy before they AoE you down, and just keep chipping them before they kill you. And it's pretty much a game plan. Just keep spamming Lunas, get a few bunny corns in there to go feed them yellow directly, and rinse and repeat until you win. As far as the class event this week, it is a Wild Folk restriction for Pan's Veil. With that being said, we're just using Black Manacles and a triple Finessa. Finessa pretty useful, especially on the mid-low rarity range this week for a lot of various game modes, as she does have a Link, an Empower, and a bunch of durability that you can gain, while also having upscaling damage. So she's pretty much a little bit of everything that you kind of need. You're generally not using this too much outside of events where you're restricted to have to use her, but in restrictions where you are kind of forced to use her, like Wild Folk, Pan's Veil, and such, she's a really, really good option. Having 2 out of 3 really good traits and a half-decent ability that does upscale and even gives you a bunch of life to your team so you don't end up dying, which you can also use for boost ratios and the such. But yeah, we're just using 3 of these. We get all of our purple Link into Black Manacle or any other purple weapon you choose, and if you need to clean up the enemy, you could just simply use her Empower Pokes in order to kill them out, as it does damage based on what their attack value is. As far as Underspire events, as we mentioned, this is... Actually, no, we didn't mention this yet, but this is specifically the Pan's Veil restriction. You're allowed to use absolutely anything from Pan's Veil, as it is a Pan's Veil event week. With that being said, any kind of standard Wild King, Wild Queen team is probably going to be your best bet. You can use King Selena's for 50% mana start, and use any hero class you wish. So in this case, I am using Bard, and just using a pretty standard mana accumulation weapon. However, as the weapon does have to be from Pan's Veil as well, so we were using a Pan's Veil exploding weapon. But yeah, any team around Wild King, Wild Queen, going to be very, very, very strong. Either or of them or both of them, and King Selena's for the 50% mana start. Very, very, very solid. As far as the low rarity team, we are not using any of that though. We were using, of course, all the lower rarity stuff, as we mentioned. Finessa could be really good on any kind of low rarity team this week. Just covers a lot of your ground, says upscaling, gives you free HP so you don't die. Luna we're using again as it is a faction legend, so it is easier to obtain than a standard legend. However, of course, you can event key for all the other legends. You can't for this one, but all the other legends that are from this kingdom you can if you do want to end up utilizing them, like King Selena's. However, they do cost a little bit more than just throwing some shards at an Underspire location. And then we're just using a Lupina Explorer, a little bit of Skull Dodge, a little bit of Spell Dodge, and just a little bit of mana accumulation while doing a double poke. And then we're just going to keep gaining our mana accumulation off the glaive to feed back into everything else. And we're basically just spamming the Lupina Explorer and Luna until we end up killing out the team. It's actually relatively similar to the faction team in that we're basically just spamming Luna until we would. The Finesse is mostly just here to make sure we don't die, and the Lupina is mostly just here to make sure we don't die, get a little bit of extra damage poke and a little bit extra board control. But the core of the team is just mana accumulate into spam Luna, and you're just doing that over and over again. And everything here is legend or below, or specifically faction legends, which are easier to target. And both of the other two are in the event key drop table as well. So if you end up getting King Selena's, you can technically go down that route as well. End up replacing out Luna for King Selena's and go down that route and get 50% mana start for the few things that don't end up getting it naturally, including things like your hero if you want to go down that route. Keep in mind, if you do want to do it a little bit safer, it might be worthwhile to switch out the weapon and switch to something like Elementalist or anything that can Barrier on Brown, as Bard does not have access to Barrier on Brown, but you can end up switching that out, but you probably also have to switch out the weapon if you do so, as the amount of mana accumulation that you're going to get from it is quite a bit lower, given that it's boosted based on Wild Folk, and that's one less Wild Folk on your team at minimum if you're replacing out your hero. And not everything from Pan's Veil is a Wild Folk, so do be wary of that. So, as far as the weekend faction event, we're going to be getting a new troop as well as the Dark Court's new layout. Dark Court is specifically a yellow-purple restriction, so you're allowed to use anything there. So for this, we're just using a mana accumulation weapon into Guard's Avatar, Surquat, and Hadley for the upper range. However, you could do this with pretty much anything using Wand and Leprechaun into any 2 damage sources. We just happen to be doing this as this is basically the alternative of a Rowan quick kill. As far as the higher level range, we're doing another kind of just cookie cutter team that can end up working for quite a few things depending on what you have. And of course, we're using High King Iron God Zolgoth here, but this core of this team is actually Thrall Leprechaun. You just simply put a damage source or mana accumulator in your first slot, definitely put a damage source in your third slot, as it's the safest location you could ever put anything, and there you go, you got a team. So in this case, we're just using the core of Thrall Leprechaun into whatever your 2 biggest damage sources are, which just happen to be High King Iron God Zolgoth for this, but you can replace it out for anything that you have available. As far as the faction weekend is concerned, this is specifically, of course, Dark Courts for the weekend event, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And for that, we're going to be using the tank. He gains barrier every single time he does his ability, so we're going to be using that to make sure we don't die. A little bit of score reduction too if they do hit through. We have Kelpie here, mostly just to mana drain if you need. It's a very small mana drain, but there's a small chance to devour. And if you get a devour, you kind of just auto-win any fight that happens on. Just make sure you double-check on if the enemy has immune to devour or not, if you are trying to go for the devour. His devour rate's normally pretty low. I think at max he gets, what, 12%? 2% chance? Yeah, it's only up to a 12% chance, which is not that high. But, you know, if you do get it, that is very, very, very devastating, given that you're mostly doing it for the mana drain rather than necessarily the devour. And then we're just spamming out the legend. As with most factions, you can tend to just spam it out until you win, and this is no exception. It's just an AoE spam one, very similar to the Tuesday event this week, where it drains all mana from an enemy and then deals a bunch of damage to them and all enemies above. Basically meaning, unless you're needing to use her as a mana drain, which ideally you want to be using Kelpie for, but unless you're using her as a mana drainer, you are always hitting their last slot in order to go hit their entire enemy team with full AoE damage, and you just keep repeating that until you end up winning out the fight. Ideally using Kelpie to mana drain anything you need from the first three, and this to always hit on last slot, unless you absolutely have to go and mana drain something from the opposing team. And that is all the teams, all of which will be in description and pinned a comment below if you want to go and copy paste any of them. So, as far as other things, of course, we already ended up going over the world event, though we did not go over the scoring for the world event. Basically, it's one of those 15-15 and then by 31 you're back to all of them kind of situations. Long story short, just don't take Fallen Satyr, which is easy to tell because it is the blue one. So don't take the blue one, plus try to avoid Nax if you can, and you should be getting your maximum amount of points. But if you want to play it very simply, just don't take the blue Fallen Satyr and you should be fine to go. As long as you're taking these, oh gosh, why does it keep dragging it? But as long as you're keeping these 4 as your main priority, that's the main thing that you're going to be needing. Just don't take Fallen Satyr, and try not to take Nax, as for the first 30 battles, it actually does matter if you try avoiding Nax, as there might be some situations where these other ones are still available. But once you reach 31 plus battles, all you need to worry about is just never take Fallen Satyr, as it will just keep repeating it over and over again, and you'd eventually have just all Fallen Satyrs, where you just keep taking the same location over and over, as there's nothing better than it. But that doesn't happen until the 31st battle, so the first 2 you do have to make sure to not, or the first 30 battles, you have to make sure not to take those 2, particularly not take that one. But you should be good to go. Overall, pretty straightforward. And worst comes to worst, just don't take the blue one and you'll be fine. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, we have the restriction of Beast. So anything under Beast restriction, you can go with a nice just standard team where you go like Mass Mana Accumulation, Bork, Wand into whatever your 2 best damage sources are, or you can end up going all in Wild Folk and, or sorry, all in Beast, and just go like 50% Mana Star into whatever your best damage sources are within that category. As far as the campaign, still trucking along. I think we're at like, what, week 3-ish at this moment? So if you still been making progress on that, definitely make sure to do so. Unfortunately, Decaying Gems are a pretty bad mechanic overall this week, or this season. But, you know, still more brown gems, so anytime you're ever running a brown team this season, it is a little bit better compared to how it normally would be in the past, as there's just slightly more brown gems coming onto the board compared to normal. As far as weekly events, we kind of went over it earlier, but we do have the Tuesday faction event for the Warrens, which is associated with Pan's Veil. Wednesday, we have the Valentine's Day pet. Do not forget to go get it, as it will only be available that day, and we have no clue when it will return again, so make sure to get it now, just so you don't have to worry about it later. Of course, purely cosmetic. Thursday, we have the class event for Bard. Bard's pretty underwhelming. It gets used a lot on weeks like this, where you have Wild Folk restriction, Pan's Veil restriction, stuff like that. But outside that context, it's a pretty dated hero class. Even just the concept of gaining 1 to all stats per turn is barely even useful back when it was added, and now as stats keep getting higher and higher and higher, it gets increasingly less useful over time. So it's definitely one of those hero classes that's been pretty underwhelming. It does have immune to silence, which is interesting, but there are very few situations where that is ever applicable. So outside the context of weeks like this, you tend to almost never really use it. And as we mentioned, this Friday we have ourselves the Dark Court faction event. So new Deep Delve variants, a new troop coming in through that, and of course 3 days to go and complete that out instead of the Tuesday ones that are only 1 day long. As far as the Soul Forge is concerned, I actually didn't check this earlier. Let's see, do we have anything good? Scorpions for double insta-kills, interesting. If you end up poisoning the enemy, you can double kill them and then just double kill. Overall, is it worth really using him? Kind of situational in the current state of the game. There's just so many other ways to insta-kill, and the biggest issue with him, like with many mythics or even just troops in general in the game, is he has no extra turn follow-up. So he'll do his ability and then it ends. You don't get like any extra turn potential, even if you get a kill, nothing like that. In a ideal scenario, he gets a double kill, then a double kill, meaning that if you fill his 28 mana cost twice for 56 total, that you will end up auto-winning the battle. But this does require running Curse Poison to any degree, either on one troop or on a mix of troops, as well as actually getting all the mana for him twice over after ending your turn at least once. So there's generally quicker ways to do it, as a lot of insta-kills like Iron Gut, Zolgoth, and such, even Catherics and such. They have extra turn potential, really high extra turn potential in some cases, like in Iron Gut, which is pretty much guaranteed unless he's frozen. whereas Scorpius has a 0% chance to ever actually turn, so he doesn't get used too often compared to other insta-kill options, but there are situations where you do end up running him. It's just very situational. Sacrox is pretty good. I would even say higher priority, probably the highest priority here. He ends up doing a bunch of mana accumulation. He's kind of like those giants that do double and then like +3, except he does it only to, or he does it for every color, but he does it for 25 mana cost instead of 12, which might sound awful given that he's more than double the mana cost. However, the ability to choose whatever the most populated color is on the board is very useful. Ideally, you want to be choosing the highest one out of blue, green, or brown at any given time. But basically, let's say you were using like Forest Troll, and he doubles all green +3, and for only 12 mana, but there's only like 5 green on the board. But let's say there's like 12 brown. In the case of this troop, you can end up going and doubling the brown, and you would feed mana back into this, you would feed mana into whatever else you have, and if you're running like Beatrix, Truffle, whatever else with that team, you know, that would probably give them mana, or in the case if you do it over to green after the board gets cleared. So, has a lot of interesting use cases. One of the other ones is if there's ever good life boost ratio, which in the current state of the game I would say, not really. Armor boost ratio, if you're going to use any boost ratio, you're probably using like attack, magic, or armor. You're almost never really using life, as it gets quite a bit less value than using armor ones in the current state of the game. But if we ever get something really viable, this is really great option for pretty much infinite loop stacking life. So in any kind of situation where you are in a situation where you need extra life for damage, or if another one comes in the future, this is pretty much your best option. Maybe not always your best option, but definitely a really high priority option. It takes a little bit to get going, and if he misses, it's really bad. But generally speaking, once you get him going, he just kind of keeps going forever. So yeah, situational, but definitely worth considering. And beyond that, I do not see anything other than one of the dragons. But of course, if you end up needing that to go get your Stellarix. Anyways, beyond that, as far as weapons are concerned, I mostly... Oh yeah, actually, Yasmin's Pride, I guess, is somewhat worth mentioning. I don't think it's used much in the current state of the game, but speaking of life boost ratio, it eliminates all armor from an enemy and then gives all allies life boosted by armor eliminated. This is actually a pretty decent life boost ratio weapon, but as we mentioned, you'll probably almost never see me using this compared to Urskia Shield or similar related things that end up doing armor instead, as even though this has boost ratioed life, life, as we mentioned, just isn't as good of a ratio compared to armor. So if you're going to be doing one or the other, you normally want to prioritize armor over life. However, if there ever is a good life boost ratio kind of team in the future, this is one of the weapons you might consider if you're not doing like Infinite Sacroax or something similar. So do be wary of that. As far as weapons, the ones we mentioned, if you want to go and end up utilizing them, we end up showing the Glaive, which is really good with Wild Folk, which is really good for Underspire this week. And, of course, given the Pan's Veil restriction, it is also really good to be using the Explodey weapon, which... oh, never mind. We actually get that from the event. Never mind. Oh, no, this is a past event. No, that's not from the World event. Never mind. Yeah, this is one of the past events. But, yeah, getting the Lost Chance also pretty good. Ends up doing a bunch of explodes, boost based on all wild folks, gives them a boost, does a summon. Really good if you're doing something like Underspire and you need just a safe option. Put this in the second slot, put a meat shield in first, put your 2 main damage sources in third and fourth, and just keep spamming this, and if your first slot dies, boom, you get a resummon. Really good for low rarity team. I think we showed the exact team for low rarity team as well. Although I did show it with the damage weapon, but you can end up, of course, going down the mana accumulation route and put that there instead. But that layout of team of keeping that in second and have it constantly resummon is very, very strong. But beyond that, mostly skippable. And if you're going to go for one, I would say future-proofing wise, if you don't have it, get Yasmin's Pride. It's the most applicable one that will have value in the future. And also, out of my paranoia, I know it's not, but I always feel the need every single time to go check these 2 weapons. Because it's like, wait, am I going to forget this week that it's the one? But no, it's not. I know 100% that it's not, yet I always feel the need to check every single one of these 2, being like, oh, is this the week? Is this the week? No, it's not the week. Just none for Pan's Veil. Anyways, watch, I'll say that one week and I'll still be there because I didn't notice it. I would not be surprised. Anyways, other things we haven't gone over. We did that. Let's see. We mentioned this, though, just to reiterate. You do have access to both skull and spell damage, so you can go skull spam teams or cast spam teams, or technically even both, though you generally want to prioritize one over the other. And long story short, just don't take the Fallen Satyr, the blue one, and you should be fine. As long as you're not taking this guy, you should be good to go. And beyond that, event queue drop table. So, of course, event queue drop table is associated to that of Pan's Veil this week. So, if we go bring all of that up, let's see, base rarity, show all, and the Kingdom of Pan's Veil. We should be able to go see everything here. If I could ever get it alphabetically, there we go. So, is it worth opening event keys? Somewhat, actually. It is somewhat not horrible. So, everything that is not in the event queue drop table include the 4 faction troops from Pan's Veil. Let's see, the Chalice from the 10-year anniversary event. This, I believe, is currently in no drop table. I'm not sure if they've, I don't believe they have, but I don't believe they've added this to Vault Key drop table yet. They probably are pretty soon, probably by the time we hit next patch, so by the time we get the Guild War patch, probably around that time I would assume this would be in drop table if it's not already, but I believe it isn't. I haven't opened them in at least a couple weeks, but the ones I have opened, I haven't seen it, so, and I haven't seen any posts mentioning that they are in drop table, so if I am wrong, someone could probably mention it in the comment section if you have seen one. But I believe this is not in any drop table, not in event key drop table, nor in Vault Key drop table, though it will eventually be in Vault Key drop table later down the line. It just isn't yet from the 10-year anniversary event. Just kind of just waiting so everyone gets value from the 10-year anniversary event, I guess. Beyond that, the other thing that is not in drop table includes the Immortal Capricorn. The normal one is, but the immortal one is not. Of course, this is only from PvP as far as obtaining that. So, what is in drop table? The most noteworthy ones, if you're just going for a little bit, a couple of them. We have 4x Silence. This is one of the OG troops, and it has gotten nerfed so many times. But even in the current state of the game, there are some rare circumstances where it can be used. It silences all enemies and itself. Though the fact that it silences itself isn't really much of a backfire these days, because if you're just using wand plus the silent one, you just use both of those together, and then boom, you just have immune. So you can just keep getting it off as if you're not even silent, just get 4x silence off. The biggest issue with it is, of course, like many troops, it just ends its turn with no follow-up, so very situational, but it does have its occasional use cases. Beyond that, the most useful thing that if you're going for something that's like kind of middle rarity is get King Salinas. He has 50% mana start to all wild folk. This would be very absurdly useful for Underspire this week. So if you want to end up utilizing that so you can get Underspire done a little bit easier, 50% mana start to all wild folk is a good majority of this entire kingdom. I would say like 70-80% of this kingdom is wild folk. So it has a lot of synergy with absolutely everything here. And beyond that, if you're going to be going for mythics, I would say for the most part, I guess Capricorn is a little bit bad. But most of the mythics here are pretty good. Wild King and Wild Queen are some of the best skull spam mythics in the game. Particularly Wild King. It enrages all allies, gives them a bunch of attack, everything, not just one, all of them, and then creates a mix of skulls and yellow gems. Unfortunately, this mix is a little bit inconsistent on if it extra turns or not. However, if the board is already filled with a lot of yellow and skull, it probably will, though if the board is kind of mixed or pretty even, it probably won't, especially if it's low on yellow or skull. Like if they just denied all your yellow, you're probably not landing an extra turn with this. But it gives you a lot of value, so even if your team is dying to the skulls that you're creating, every single one of your teammates are equally as strong, pretty much, unless they have like some kind of extra skull modifier from traits. But they're all going to be enraged, they're all going to have an extremely high boosted attack, so even when one dies, the next one in line is just as strong as the one that pretty much just died, so he just creates an entire team of really, really strong skull-oriented troops just from casting him, even just once, but particularly a few times. Then there's also things like Wild Queen. Wild Queen is a lot safer, so if we ever get something like Guild Wars, if there's any kind of rework with it, where it actually matters that you don't end up losing troops, you don't end up taking damage, stuff like that, this is pretty useful in that regard, in that it steals a bunch of attack from an enemy, and then gives it to your first ally, aka lowering their attack and giving your first ally a ton of attack. This only ends up boosting one, and ends up creating the mix of green and skull instead of yellow to skull like the other one. However, even though it only does one, this allows you to predict if you are or aren't going to be killing out the enemy. So if you know it's very likely, like the board state has a bunch of green and skulls on the board, and it's very likely that you're going to kill out the first enemy, you would then end up using this on the second enemy so that you steal from the next one in line and just keep going down the line, so on and so forth. But if you're going to cast it, and there's a good chance the first enemy is like bulky enough that you know for sure you're not going to kill it, even with the board state, you would go and use this on the first enemy. So when they do hit you back with any amount of skull and waste their turn, it won't end up hitting you nearly as much, and then your first slot will be nice and boosted. So it's a lot safer than Wild King, but it's a lot less overall value than Wild King, where Wild King kind of just bursts up a bunch of value all at once, but doesn't give you any safety. Wild Queen gives you a small boost, but gives you a lot of safety in making sure that the enemy doesn't really hit you hard, that hard back. Pan is kind of average as far as when it's used, and Capricorn is a little bit towards the weaker end. Knocks the enemy to the back and stuns them, then moves itself to the front and gains a bunch of everything. There's much better ways to be doing this. I would sooner use the... oh gosh, what's that one guy called? What, I forget his name. Like one that gives a bunch of stats like life, attack, and armor to an ally and gives them full mana. I'd much sooner use that guy and just use it on something good, like Lord or Slaughter, rather than using Capricorn. It's just very situational, and he doesn't have good enough traits to justify using him as like your main first slot compared to some of the other really strong ones in the game. So for that reason, he doesn't really get much value, but you can't go wrong with at least half of these. with a 3 out of 4 that you get something pretty decent as far as the drop table is concerned. But the biggest things you want to be seeing being Wild King being the highest priority and Wild Queen being the second highest priority. But beyond that, yeah, if you're just throwing a feud, you're mostly just looking to get King Salinas. I would advise opening event keys until you get King Salinas if you have 0. And that's basically it. If you get a mythic along the way, that's nice, but unless you really like Skull Mythics, it's probably not worth wasting it and just going and just crafting them directly when you can, but it's still worth giving it a shot. Let's see, do we get one? No. Actually, I did get a mythic from one of the thingies the other day, though. I didn't actually show it on anything, but we actually got it from one of the events. I think it was like the World event or something, a raid event, and we ended up pulling a mythic from it, which does happen. You can get it from those random troops. Whenever one of those event thingies, I don't think this one does, but whenever one of those event thingies say that they give you random troops for the event, yeah, it does for this too. Those can be mythic. It's very rare, but it actually can roll a mythic. We've seen it at least, I think, like 10 times now of all the events that have happened. It's very rare, but they do still occur occasionally. Definitely not a way that you'd farm them, obviously, but when they do happen, it's like, ooh, nice. But anyways, last thing to go over, of course, is the new troop, though unfortunately also the most irrelevant thing happening this week. The only really extremely relevant one being the Wednesday holiday pet for Valentine's Day. But as far as the new troop is concerned, we got the Zombie Goat. As far as what it is a 12 mana cost green-purple. It diseases and stuns an enemy and knocks them to the back. Explodes 2 gems of one of their mana colors. Overall, it doesn't really do anything. I guess it gets to create a decaying gem when it dies, but that doesn't really do anything. To some degree, I guess technically, because let's say hypothetically, like the concept of this trait makes sense, but the actual amount of value that it does makes 0 sense. So what is happening when this happens? You will have an ally that dies, that then creates a decaying gem for the enemy, in the case that they could probably use it immediately to try to get like a brown extra turn. But the premise of this is, oh, your troop is dying, so now the decaying gem will start to hurt the enemy. But even if that is the case, that's 1 armor per turn. You know how little effect this is? It is so little. Like, I get what they're going for, but its effective value is almost 0, if not negative, in the sense that the enemy might immediately be able to utilize it for their own value. Because let's say, hypothetically, they kill your ally, an extra turn at the same time. Like, let's say they're using Truffle or something, or Beatrix or something, and it kills out the Zombie Goat. They now have a bunch of green and brown on the board, and you just created them another brown. So now they're going to take an extra turn with the Decaying Gem into all the browns that they created, fill into whatever else they have on their team, and then keep casting on you. So this basically has negative value in most situations. Yeah, maybe at most you'll be able to reduce the enemy's armor by a few across the entire team. But at worst case scenario, this thing dies and just feeds a free extra turn to the enemy, which is really hilarious. But I wouldn't even be surprised if this has some kind of weird glitch too. But I haven't actually seen it. I haven't actually messed with it too much, as it's probably not going to ever really be used. But yeah, that trait is so bad. But obviously you never use this thing. Its ability is also really bad. But his unique trait that it kind of has, or somewhat unique trait, is also absurdly bad. Anything that ever gets that is more so a negative than a positive trait in most situations, so not ideal. But anyways, guys, if you still have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. All the teams, as we mentioned, are in the pinned comment as well as the description. I also put the 2 links for the description for the all the info that we have on the Guild Wars that's coming up. That should be in a few weeks. They're currently beta testing it right now, and yeah, it should be out hopefully by the end of the month. I haven't given an official date yet, but I would assume sometime like late February, early March, we will probably see the Guild Wars patch. But yeah, don't forget to go grab the pet on Wednesday for Valentine's Day. Don't forget to go grab the other thing for free on Valentine's Day itself. Sorry, the pet is on Wednesday, not Valentine's Day. The reward thingy for the little bit of gems and everything is on Valentine's Day itself on this Friday. And beyond that, just as a reminder, we will be streaming tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, handing out the holiday pet and everything like that, one of the old ones. However, next week's Monday, I probably will not be around. I'll try to get the video out as early as I can. But if it's not up by like a few hours after reset, it's probably not coming out until a few days after reset. So hopefully I'll be able to get it up then. Otherwise, yeah, it probably won't be up for a while, as some work's being done on the house, fixing pretty much the last thing of hurricane damage related to the hurricane like several years ago. We're almost there. I feel like almost every other year something gets fixed from it, but we're almost fully repaired. We're getting there. But anyways, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week, a wonderful Valentine's Day, and I will catch you guys later. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks for watching.